They say it's only a game, but Texas sports fans know better. This time, however, what some see as an existential threat to college sports. That's today on The Standard.
Texas Standard is a production of KUT Austin, KERA North Texas, Houston Public Media, and Texas Public Radio in San Antonio.
I'm David Brown. Though tomorrow all eyes will be on San Antonio as the Spurs try to keep their championship hopes alive. A scandal involving Texas Tech football in the national spotlight right now. We'll hear why and talk about what's at stake. Meanwhile, in Houston, evidence that there's nothing like a challenging race to focus political will. After years of infighting, Texas Republicans putting up a united front at their party convention. And in El Paso, an effort to open up frontiers to an underrepresented community of filmmakers, marking a major milestone. All those stories and a whole lot more today on the Texas Standard. No matter where you are, it's Texas Standard Time on this 12th day of June 2026. A big weekend for sports fans in Texas as the Spurs return home to San Antonio and try to keep their championship hopes alive against the New York Knicks. But as consequential as tomorrow night's game might be, it pales beside another sports story unfolding in Texas right now. Because no matter what happens on the court Saturday, sports remains one of the few places where millions of people voluntarily agree to a shared reality. The lines are painted, the clock counts down, the score is public. In theory, the same rules apply to everyone. That's a foundation we increasingly take for granted. It's why baseball's Black Sox scandal was about more than just crooked betting. It was a threat to trust in the game itself. Which brings us to Texas Tech's new quarterback, Brendan Sorsby. Last season at Cincinnati, Sorsby threw for nearly 2,800 yards, 27 touchdowns, just 5 interceptions. But the number that may matter most is 22. Because at 22 years old, he sits squarely within the age group most heavily targeted by sports betting apps. Those apps have exploded in popularity among young men, part of a broader culture that includes online wagering, prediction markets, crypto speculation, and influencer-driven promises of easy money. In April, after reports surfaced that the NCAA was investigating him for gambling violations, Sorsby entered treatment for gambling addiction and acknowledged wagering roughly $90,000 over 4 years, including bets on Indiana football while he was on the Hoosiers roster. The NCAA permanently banned him. But a Lubbock judge has granted a temporary injunction allowing him to play, and now Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton is threatening legal action if the Big 12 attempts to keep him off the field. Our own Laura Rice spoke with football writer John Bryce of USA Today.
All right, get us up to speed. For people who have not heard of Brendan Sorsby, who is he and what's he been accused of doing?
Brendan Sorsby is Texas Tech's new quarterback, signed out of the NCAA's transfer portal in January of this year. He began his college football career at Indiana University as a backup quarterback, well before Curt Cignetti turned Indiana into a national power. He then transferred to the University of Cincinnati, where Sorsby became a star on the field and parlayed that into the basically free agent opportunity that he took advantage of this past January, and that's when he ultimately chose to sign with Texas Tech for a deal that we've been told repeatedly is worth multiple millions of dollars. After that time, earlier this spring, Sorsby legal authorities, as well as the NCAA and the Big 12 Conference, were alerted to the fact that Brendan Sorsby had been a routine gambler. They notified Texas Tech officials that Brendan Sorsby would then be investigated for his gambling activity, at which point in time, Brendan Sorsby lawyered up with Jeffrey Kessler, renowned in these cases. They devised a strategy. Brendan Sorsby entered inpatient rehab facility. He completed that 35-day treatment plan. And then most recently, earlier this week, in a move that shocked basically the entire sports world, but certainly the entire collegiate sports world, retired Lubbock County Judge Ken Curry in Lubbock County District Court ruled Sorsby eligible despite his clear violation and admission to violating NCAA rules on contract law basis. He did not rule Judge Curry Curry did not rule anything on the NCAA's rules themselves, but rather on contract law basis. And that's why, as of right now, Brendan Sorsby is eligible to be Texas Tech's starting quarterback in the fall, minus a 2-game suspension that Sorsby's legal team proposed and that right now the legal system has accepted.
All right, you anticipated my question a little bit, which is why a judge is weighing in on this at all. It feels like an internal matter for the NCAA to decide on, and they seem pretty angry about this, that it's been brought to a court level. Is that a good reading of what's happening?
Yeah, it's an inflection point for the NCAA because this is the most inviolate rule in all of sports, really. You cannot gamble on your own team or your own sport. And that's exactly what not only Brendan Sorsby is accused of doing, but admits to having done during his time at Indiana. He's placed literally thousands of bets that he's admitted to. He placed dozens of bets on his own team, the Indiana Hoosiers. He says they were all positive bets, betting on his team to have either collective or individual success, and that he did it because he wasn't playing and had a anxiety disorder and a gambling addiction. So his legal team got this into what is perceived as a very friendly court, the Lubbock County District Court. And again, they argued this case on the merit of contract law, saying that the NCAA's rules were and their proposed punishment of Sorsby being ineligible for the remainder of his collegiate career were unfair because of American with Disabilities Act, because he was clinically diagnosed with an anxiety disorder and a gambling addiction.
What has Texas Tech's role been in this? I mean, is it a co-plaintiff with Sorsby, or what position has the university taken? Obviously, they have a financial interest in the outcome of what happens.
They have a massive financial interest in the outcome of what happens because Sorsby is at the centerpiece of a football roster that's been assembled at a cost of tens of millions of dollars, along with the coaching staff that's been assembled at a cost of tens of millions of dollars. And so the university is not a co-plaintiff in this, but the university is making it clear that it supports Brendan Sorsby. It will continue to support Brendan Sorsby. It has welcomed him back into the program. It has welcomed him back onto the campus. It has made it clear that it will continue to support him. Athletics Director Kirby Hocutt earlier this week issued a statement basically in support of Brendan Sorsby, while also saying he understands the frustrations of his peers and colleagues around the country, and basically saying, well, this is a nuanced situation, and certainly critics of this move do not believe there's any nuance in this because, again, Pete Rose gambled on his team as a manager, as a professional manager, and was banned for life. There have been, I think, 17 NCAA college basketball athletes who have been found guilty of betting on their own games. They were banned for life. And now here's Brendan Sorsby, who has admitted to gambling on his own team, and he is right now eligible to continue playing the game.
So what's been the reaction from other schools? Texas Tech is making this argument that we are in this world where, I mean, you can't watch a sports game without seeing dozens of betting ads being thrown in your face. And they're saying this is just the situation that we're in. And lots of young people are susceptible to this gambling addiction. Are other schools sympathetic to that argument, or are they upset with this ruling?
No, I don't know of a single ally from an institutional standpoint that Texas Tech has at this point in time. I just mentioned on a podcast earlier today that I think, and certainly this resonates with you in Texas, if you think about SMU and the Pony Excess days of the 1980s and the cheating scandal that ultimately landed that program, the death penalty, this is not collective cheating, but this has Texas Tech, in my opinion, positioned to be the most reviled program in college football since those 1980s SMU Mustangs and since those late 80s and early 90s Miami Hurricanes. Right now, I don't know, again, of a single ally for either Brendan Sorsby or Texas Tech University at this point in time.
Does the NCAA have an appeal option here? Is that something they want to keep fighting in court?
Yes, the NCAA has filed notice of appeal. They've requested an expedited appeal because right now the court date has been set for February 8th, 2027 to Yes, to hear further on this temporary injunction that's been granted by Judge Curry that is right now the legal basis for Sorsby's eligibility. The problem there, as you well know, is February 8th is exactly 2 weeks to the day after the college football season concludes, with the college football playoff championship scheduled for January 25th. So
Wow.
the NCAA wants this hearing expedited as much as possible. The NCAA, I'm told by legal experts that have spoken with us this week at USA Today, is very likely to see this through. Even if they cannot get the court date accelerated, they are likely to see this through to the very end because of the dangerous precedent that it sets. Again, this is the one rule. If you bet on another college sport as a college athlete other than your sport, you're supposed to be banned for a year with the chance to then resume playing after sitting out a year and after losing a year of eligibility. When you bet on your own sport and your own team, it is supposed to be a lifetime ban. And so, as legal experts have explained it to me, this is truly a line of demarcation for the NCAA. And if they don't pursue appeal all the way to its end, then it risks, the direct quotes of a legal expert to us yesterday, it risks crumbling the very foundation of the NCAA.
John Bryce covers college football for USA Today. John, thanks so much.
Thank you.
The Republican Party of Texas kicked off its biennial convention yesterday in Houston. This is an event that gives GOP leaders, state lawmakers, political candidates, and others a chance to meet, strategize, and take care of important party business. This convention runs through Saturday, and the Texas Newsroom's own Blaze Gainey has more on what to watch for.
With contentious runoffs now behind Texas Republicans, the state party is set to outline its platform moving forward. They'll also be voting on party leadership roles and established rules. UT San Antonio political scientist John Taylor is looking to see how much the MAGA portion of the party will control what comes out of the convention.
Absolutely. You're seeing it in the platform and the fights over the platform, the updates on that, fights over Republican Party leadership, in particular challenges to Abraham George, coming from the much further right side of the Republican Party.
Taylor says he'll also be watching to see what will be the GOP's priorities for the 2027 legislative session. I'm Blaze Gainey in Austin.
We'll have more on the Texas GOP convention a little later in the broadcast when we review the week in Texas politics with the Texas Tribune. There's a whole lot more of the Texas Standard just ahead. Don't touch that dial. We're coming up on 19 minutes past the hour, Texas Standard Time.
Support for Texas Standard comes from Texas Mutual Insurance Company, a workers' compensation provider that's been caring for hardworking Texans for over 30 years. More at texasmutual.com/expert partner. Support for Texas Standard comes from UT San Antonio, providing education and research for communities across Texas, with a focus on student success and workforce development. The University of Ambition, utsa.edu.
It's the Texas Standard. I'm Laura Rice. Austin has spent decades selling itself as a place where creativity, technology, and ambition could all coexist. But as the city's growth has accelerated, so have the questions about who benefits, who gets left behind, and whether Austin can hold on to the identity that made so many people want to move here in the first place. Those questions are at the center of an upcoming Austin Forum on Technology and Society, a discussion featuring two recent books, The Cost of Cool, Austin's Tech Growth and the People Left Behind, and Lost in Austin, The Evolution of an American City. The books approach Austin's transformation from different angles, but both wrestle with the same larger issue. What happens when a city becomes a global tech hub faster than it can plan for it? From affordability and gentrification to culture, music, and the future of work, the conversation is really about more than Austin. It's about what happens to American cities when growth and identity collide. I'm joined by The Cost of Cool author John Roberts. John, welcome to the Texas Standard.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
and Lost in Austin author Alex Hannaford. Alex, welcome to you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, both of your books push back against a simple anti-growth message, but changes to Austin are undeniable. What do you think people are actually mourning when they say Austin doesn't feel like Austin anymore? John, do you want to start with that?
My first memories of Austin go back all the way to 1973. And so the nostalgia that we feel for the city really depends on when we arrived. It's a city that's been evolving and changing rapidly since its very inception.
Everybody, it doesn't matter when you got to Austin, everybody seems to have the same sort of thing. They kind of fall in love with it and they lament what sort of changed. I think the point I make in my book is that all of those things can be true, but I think what happened in the sort of it was sort of 2020, 2021, that kind of time frame, I think that the changes have been so profound that there's kind of no going back. So the affordability thing was the thing that really changed it.
Well, you've touched on some of this already because Austin's become really one of the great success stories of the modern tech economy, but success for whom? Alex, what groups or communities do you think have paid the highest price for growth?
You know, Austin for more than a decade was the only fast-growing city of its size with a declining Black population. And still today, the people that are leaving are Black and Hispanic people and moving out to the suburbs. So, you know, the things that I moved there for back in when I first actually moved there in 2003 were, you know, it was an affordable place. I was a freelance journalist earning no money, and I could, you know, write about all these fascinating things and pay very little rent, and it was diverse, and it was just cheap to live there, and it was a great place.
John, what would you add to that? Who pays?
Well, I think that you can't really have it both ways. You can't be as popular as Austin was becoming and maintain that affordability. It was a bubble, and that bubble had to burst. My co-author, Tracy McDaniel, writes the chapter on the people left behind. And in that sense, Alex and I agree completely. But the question you have to ask is, can any city evolve in a way that embraces technology and not leave people behind? We certainly were aware of the division that Interstate 35 had created, but we weren't really thinking about the implications of a rising real estate market. I remember being at a chamber function in I don't know, 1995 or 1996, and everyone was asked to put little stickers on the board with the number one issue. And you know what the number one issue was, Laura? It was traffic. Because no one could think about anything but traffic. And so there was a kind of baked in naivete that I think we're finally getting over.
Can I push
Yes.
back on that? I mean, it depends who we're talking about when we say we were naive. I think that, you know, I found, again, in the Texas, in the archives at the Texas History Center, or the Austin History Center, I'm sorry, I found this old pamphlet, which I describe in the book from 1970, I think it was 8 or 9, produced by a Hispanic community organization down in Rainey Street. And they were warning in this pamphlet of being priced out and being, you know, essentially kind of not able to kind of live in Austin anymore. They were kind of predicting what was going to happen. And I make the point, and I think, you know, John's right. I think I blindly moved to Austin, not realizing that kind of changes were already afoot. I think it's easy to do that. But the truth is that politicians have the ability to, you know, create affordable housing in Austin, and they've never done it. You know, when they say that new apartment complexes that are being built need to be 10% affordable, 10% of those complexes need to be affordable, which is what they did a few years back. But then they didn't make it kind of mandatory for it always to be affordable. So in other words, you could buy an apartment in the 10% of that building that is affordable, and but then you can live in it for a period of time and then sell it, and then it no longer is affordable. So that apartment complex suddenly becomes 100% unaffordable. It's not right. I mean, public transport is terrible. It's always been terrible. People that are cleaning dishes and working in kitchens and serving us food, they can't even get into the city because there's no decent public transport, and they certainly can't afford to live there. And you just said yourself, John, that the traffic is appalling, so they can't drive in either.
Well, I think no reasonable person is going to disagree that we've been negligent in how our disadvantaged populations are treated. No one could argue that. But it needs to be seen from a larger perspective. Lamenting Austin's losses from the 90s, say, or me from the 70s for that matter, is not something unique. And the problems that arise from that kind of growth need a policy response, but they're not easy. And on the transportation question, mine is really on the promise of technology and the role that technology can play in the creation of a city, and a city of the future. And a name that I think, I know Alex is familiar with, and you probably are too, Laura, is George Kosmetsky. And George came to Austin with the idea, and it's kind of a quaint, almost Jetsons-like term, with the idea of the technopolis. He really committed to massive investment, and that idea of the technopolis was his belief, which this book and I share, that, and this is an interesting and controversial thing that George liked to say, the only solution to the problems of technology is technology.
You guys, there's obviously going to be a lot to talk about at this Austin Forum on Technology and Society, a discussion on the books Cost of Cool and Lost in Austin. It's happening Thursday, June 18th. We'll have details at texasstandard.org. John Roberts, Alex Hannaford, thank you guys so much.
Thank you both. Laura. Pleasure to see you.
We've got a whole lot more of the Texas Standard just ahead, including what sounds like an experiment that the military is doing right now involving a new kind of protein. It's really fascinating, and it may revolutionize the way that meals are eaten in the field. That story and a whole lot more as the Standard continues.
From the Texas Newsroom, I'm Matt Harrab. The Republican Party of Texas wants to make regulating AI and large-scale data centers one of its top legislative priorities for next year. Our Andrew Schneider says delegates to the party's convention underway in Houston are seeking a stronger measure of local control.
The party's Legislative Priorities Committee wants to give cities and counties final authority over zoning and land development for AI data centers. Patrick Van Dolen of San Antonio says rural residents in particular are frustrated.
Texas Commission on Environmental Quality is not doing that. They're basically rubber stamping these projects, and they're not getting they're not being responsive to the locals.
State Senator Paul Betancourt, who chairs the Senate Local Government Committee, says he's open to counties having more input.
As long as we don't end up with 254, completely patchwork quilt different views of how to do residential, commercial, and industrial development.
Earlier this year, Betancourt wrote Attorney General Ken Paxton that counties do not have the authority to ban data center construction. I'm Andrew Schneider in Houston.
The heat took a toll on visitors at the FIFA Fan Festival in Houston. 2 people were hospitalized and 19 others were treated at the scene for heat-related injuries. Meanwhile, researchers at UT Arlington say the World Cup could provide valuable insight into what large events mean for air quality in North Texas. Yun Yao Lee directs UT's Atmospheric Intelligence and Modeling Lab. She says her team put environmental sensors at AT&T Stadium, known as Dallas Stadium for the tournament, and DFW International Airport.
What we want to do is to understand what the pollution is coming from and how traffic in large events change air quality and which community are most affected.
Lee says the data could help local officials and policymakers be more informed. And the New World screwworm outbreak now involves 9 cases. Texas Public Radio's Brian Kirkpatrick reports Ag Secretary Brooke Rollins was in the Texas city of La Pryor yesterday, offering assurances about the government's response.
Rollins also shared some good news with reporters concerning the state and federal battle against the flesh-eating parasite. The very first stop this morning was to go visit that baby calf that was case one for the first time again since 1966. He's with his mom. He couldn't be happier. He's bouncing around the pasture, completely healed.
Rollins says the healed calf shows how screwworm can be attacked statewide with quick reporting by ranchers. She says 142 million sterile flies have been released or airdropped across Texas since the outbreak began. The female flies only mate once, so mating with the sterile fly reduces their population. I'm Brian Kirkpatrick in San Antonio.
And I'm Matt Harrop in the Texas Newsroom.
Support for these Texas headlines comes from Texas Monthly, producer of Where the River Took Us, a podcast from the July 4th floods, from survivor Aaron Parsley's perspective, through the voices of his family and others, telling the story of grief, healing, and survival.
33 minutes past the hour, Texas Standard Time. I'm David Brown. The U.S. military wants troops on the front lines to be able to make their own food, literally. It's trying to develop ways to use microbes to create meals, using a process that might look more at home in a laboratory than in a kitchen. Jay Price of the American Homefront Project reports on a futuristic quest for alternative proteins.
That thing that Napoleon supposedly said about armies marching on their stomachs, it still resonates, but in an age when combat might mean hunkering down for days without a way to sneak food shipments past swarms of enemy attack drones, it's a problem. One potential solution may be the kind of equipment found in a couple of labs at North Carolina State University.
The tanks that you see are what we call bioreactors.
Rohan Shearwiker is director of the university's Paso Center for Sustainable Protein. He's standing outside a glass-walled lab, gesturing inside at several gleaming stainless steel tanks about as tall as a person. They look like smaller versions of the tanks you might see at a brew pub, but surrounded by a lot more pipes, valves, and wires.
The whole environment inside is very favorable to these microbes to either grow themselves to create that biomass to go in food, or generate those proteins or enzymes or those other ingredients that we would then use in making food products.
Microbes grown in such tanks can be engineered for attributes like high levels of protein and other nutrients, and for taste, or programmed to act like tiny factories, producing molecules of useful substances like proteins and fats. The Army recently put out a call for proposals for ways to make such proteins. Its long-term goal is to foster the development of portable equipment small enough for units on the front lines to create their own food. Nicole Favreau-Farhadi is a research chemist for the U.S. Army Combat Capabilities Development Command Soldier Center, the lab that put out the proteins proposal.
Basically, we would be able to produce food where and when it's needed. It would be nutrient dense. And no military in the history has ever had that capability.
Farhadi is careful, though, to characterize the idea of food production in combat zones as a distant goal. The more immediate plan is to use the technology to increase the nutrition density of MREs, the packaged meals that soldiers eat in the field. It's essential, Farhadi says, for MREs to get lighter.
Warfighters carry anywhere from 60 to 100 pounds of gear, and every pound that we can remove translates directly to speed, endurance, reduced injury rates, and the conventional protein sources are very heavy.
And she says decreasing the size and weight of rations has another benefit. The smaller or less frequent they are, the harder food shipments are for enemies to target and destroy with drones or precision long-range missiles.
Every calorie that has to travel from the continental United States could be delayed, it could be destroyed. And so the goal is for better protein that travels better.
Alternative proteins could also provide new options for meatless and plant-based field rations, things that troops have increasingly asked for. And while growing nutritious, good-tasting food in tanks may sound unlikely, it's already being done. Examples include some of the meat substitutes you can find in supermarkets, like corn, spelled Quorn, which is made from a microfungus usually found in soil. Insulin, the diabetes drug, also has been made in this way for decades, as has rennet, a key ingredient in cheese. Adam Lehman is a scientist with the Good Food Institute, a think tank focused on accelerating the use of plant-based and cultivated proteins.
The technology is ready. The infrastructure is small but growing to actually be able to provide these ingredients. So I think these will demonstrate that they're good sources of protein for folks, that they can meet the military specs and can be used widely.
And maybe one day even be made by the troops themselves. I'm Jay Price reporting.
That story was produced by the American Homefront Project, a public media collaboration covering American military life and veterans. To be or not to be? Someone once said that's the question, but in East Texas this summer, the better question might be, how close are you to Kilgore? The Texas Shakespeare Festival opens its 41st season on June 25th, bringing professional actors from across the country to East Texas for a summer run that stretches through late July. This year's lineup includes Hamlet, A Midsummer Night's Dream, and a few not written by the bard like Emma, Dear Jack, Dear Louise, The Reluctant Dragon, and 1776. That's the musical about America's founding, timed for the nation's 250th birthday, of course. The festival began in the early 1980s as Raymond Caldwell's bid to build a professional summer theater for East Texas. 4 decades on, Kilgore is still making a pretty strong case that, all the world's a stage. Coming up on 39 minutes past the hour.
Support for Texas Standard comes from Texas Casa. For a child in foster care, small moments today can have a big impact tomorrow. More on how lending time and support can help make a difference at becomeacasa.org. Support for Texas Standard comes from HEB and the My HEB app, which is available for download, and shopping fresh departments like seafood, produce, bakery, and deli, and scheduling curbside pickup or home delivery. More at heb.com.
It's the Texas Standard. I'm David Brown. Women have long had a place in Texas film history, but this weekend, one festival in West Texas celebrates not just their past, but their future. In fact, there's an emphasis on the future here at the Femme Frontera Film Festival in El Paso, which is celebrating a decade of supporting emerging filmmakers from the border region and at the forefront of addressing some major gaps in the film industry as well. Jackie Barragan is a filmmaker who lives in Las Cruces and serves as co-director of Femme Frontera. Jackie, welcome to the Texas Standard.
Thank you for having me.
And congratulations, 10 years. Take us back to the beginning. What was the big idea behind this festival? What sort of gaps was Femme Frontera trying to address?
Yes, so in 2016, a local El Paso filmmaker returned from film school in San Francisco and decided, she had just made a film. Her name is Angie Torres, and she connected with 5 other filmmakers. They decided they wanted to create a space for women and gender expansive filmmakers on the border to address those gaps of lack of opportunities and access for women filmmakers. So they gathered 6 films. They screened it in El Paso, and it just took off. It was a space that so many people really needed. It brought people together. It inspired other storytellers to come out, and that showcase went on tour that year, and that became a tradition till today. This is our 10th annual showcase, but it's our 2nd year of being a full-fledged film festival.
Let's talk a little bit about borders, because that phrase "border stories" gets used a lot. What sorts of stories are filmmakers from this region telling that audiences elsewhere might not expect?
Oh, there's so much diverse storytelling happening here. This is a culture where there's a lot of oral history, and we have films that have been supported by Femme Frontera that addressed the femicides that are happening in Juarez. We had films of how the border wall has affected certain towns on either side of the border, and we also have films that talk about local heroes. Myself included. I made a film about my mother, and she was born Born and raised in El Paso. She became an undefeated martial artist. That film screened with and toured with the showcase. And, this year we have a Femme Frontera funded film that will be a part of the showcase, which is a carefully curated program. And it's a comedy, actually, that takes place. It's filmed in El Paso in the desert, and it kind of brings in the culture that exists here with a comedic lens. It's called La Chingada.
One of the goals of Femme Frontera, as I understand it, was helping emerging filmmakers get that first opportunity. And we were talking a little bit before we got started here, and you were telling me that Femme Frontera gave you sort of an open door, right?
Oh my gosh, yes. I always wanted to, I think it's so important for us to document our own history, especially as women. And I had an idea, which is the film about my mom. And Femme Frontera, they connected with another local organization and created funds for local filmmakers. I received that fund and got accepted into the annual showcase. And honestly, I'm not sure I would have made that first film if it wasn't for the support of Femme Frontera, and even just the support of the ecosystem of other filmmakers that are within Femme Frontera. When you do something for the first time, it's so important to have people around you that are encouraging you, that are, experienced and have the resources, and that believe in you. And so I really do attribute starting my filmmaking career to Femme Frontera.
Yeah, it seems like this is the sort of project that is perfect for El Paso, given its history and the intersection of cultures and identities and languages that El Paso represents. And I'm wondering if you can say a little bit more about the region and its role in this venture.
We sit on a, geographic location that has gone through so much. There's so much history, even predating when there was a border established. There was, and then we have these stories of people migrating back and forth. At one time, it was not an issue, and there's 80% Mexican culture in El Paso, which provides amazing Mexican food if you haven't eaten in El Paso. But also, it's a bilingual town, and we find that we are stronger because we are a community that is multicultural, that is a culture of migrants, and that's what makes our town one of the safest that has been in the United States. There's so much talent. There's so much talent here, and but we've kind of lacked the resources. There's a lot of poverty as well on either side.
But I understand that this festival now has become something of an institution. In fact, you get a lot of support from the local community and, in fact, from some larger grant providers as well, right?
Yeah, I think that because we're in a very nuanced region, bigger foundations are paying attention to what's happening, and there's also this big move for the film industry. We had one battle after the other, which was a big production that came down to El Paso and filmed there, and so there's this lens on our region. They want to see stories being told by the people who actually live here, as opposed to what we see in big Hollywood-backed films and series, where usually when it has to do with the border, it has to do with violence or crime, or and that's just not the reality. I grew up in El Paso, and that's not the reality of the lives that live there.
We often hear about film production in places like Los Angeles, New York. Austin, of course, has become some place that's getting a lot of attention. And I'm curious what this festival says about the growing importance of regional filmmaking and these local creative communities that you're a part of.
Oh, it says, that there's a lot of potential. Ever since I started my film career, I've met so many other people that are doing incredible work. And, we're bringing attention to the talent that exists here.
At the 10-year mark, it's always fun to look back, but what are you thinking about for the future? 10 years from now, where do you think this project is going to be?
We kind of want to grow a little at a time, but we foresee, Femme Frontera being an organization that really helps support filmmakers make a career and stick around. We want our filmmakers to stay and for us to cultivate them so that they don't have to leave to find other opportunities. And in 10 years, we're hoping that we are really a part of this filmmaking hub, that we've created an ecosystem of support where filmmakers feel nurtured and like they can stay and tell their stories.
Jackie Barragan is co-director of the Femme Frontera Film Festival, which is underway through June 14th in El Paso. We're going to have a link to a director's cut, if you will, of our conversation over at texasstandard.org. It's an extended version of our conversation. And Jackie, thanks so much for taking time to talk with us on The Standard.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Support for Texas Standard comes from Texas Monthly, producer of Where the River Took Us, a podcast about the July 4th floods from survivor Aaron Parsley's perspective, through the voices of his family and others, telling the story of grief, healing, and survival. Available on all podcast platforms.
This is Sean Petrie with the Typewriter Rodeo, and we are a group of friends who type poems on the spot on whatever topics people want. Foggy glasses. Oh, the summer and its humidity. Why must I suffer this hazy stupidity? My glasses fog up at near light speed, and I just want, not to bang my knee. I've tried the defoggers and the ski goggles cloth, but the steam still comes. They're not worth the cost. In photos, I look like that girl from The Ring. I don't know what to do. I've tried everything. I wipe and I wipe. Oh, this fog is my curse. I guess I'll go without my glasses. My sight couldn't get much worse. This is Sean Petrie, and you're on Texas Standard Time.
You can hear the Typewriter Rodeo every Friday here on The Standard. Got a suggestion for a custom poem? We'll send it on over. You just might hear it on the radio. But right now it's time for the week that was in Texas politics, and Jasper Scherer joins us. He's politics editor for the Texas Tribune. Jasper, welcome back.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Well, Texas Republicans are meeting in Houston, and according to the Tribune headline here, what does it say? Texas Republicans open state convention projecting unity. I was a little surprised to read in the article that all three of the top leaders of Texas politics have gathered for this session. In the recent past, we've seen several leaders missing in action at these events.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a couple things going on here, and one of those is just the reality of this being a midterm year where, Republicans feel they've kind of got to buckle down, even in Texas, just with, President Trump's kind of flagging approval numbers and looking like a pretty strong Democratic nominee in James Talrico. So it seems like, I think this is a bit of buckling down where, at this convention, the party's just trying to project this sense of unity, kind of close ranks. And then, I think it's also a bit of a reflection of, the recent conservative wins going back to the 2025 session. The Texas House kind of came on board with a lot of, things that had stalled in the past, just thinking about private school vouchers passing. So they're sort of one big happy family, at least on the surface, in a way that was not the case even a couple of years ago.
The Democrats this November, according to a website of a new bipartisan PAC supporting Talarico, they're going to spend something like $62 million to give Republicans permission to defect, in other words, to vote for Talarico. How worried are Republicans that going to start to see a lot of Republicans and independents move toward the Democratic column? I think there was something on their website. Their goal is to give Republicans permission to defect. You think Republicans are scared about this?
I think every cycle, every Democrat always talks about, courting Republican voters and going for those swing voters in the middle. I think what you don't see, what's different here is just, a super PAC popping up this early in the cycle, talking about plans to spend tens of millions of dollars towards that goal. And then, the other key difference is just past Republicans at the top of the ticket, Ted Cruz, John Cornyn, did not have this sort of, baggage trailing behind Ken Paxton. And this PAC is specifically talking about, trying to make the Senate race about corruption and character and some of the stuff that was at the center of Paxton's, impeachment and some of his legal woes, some of which have been, resolved in his favor. But nonetheless, I think it's a unique, strain in this race that, puts some heft behind this PAC's mission. So if it'll be a test, like if this PAC can help Talrico actually scoop up meaningful numbers of defecting Republicans, if they fail to do that this time, then I'm not sure if there's ever going to be a time where Democrats can peel off Republicans. This is the cycle for them to do it.
So much at stake, and Jasper Scherer and the folks at the Texas Tribune covering it. Jasper's politics editor for the Trib. Jasper, thanks so much and have a wonderful weekend.
Thanks, David. You too.
And you are listening to the Texas Standard.
Gas prices are down, but summer uncertainty remains. That's the headline from AAA this week, and it pretty well sums up what we've been hearing from Texans. I'm Wells Dunbar with Texas Standard, and this week we asked listeners whether uncertainty over fuel prices, amid the ongoing conflict between the U.S. and Iran, has changed their summer travel plans. For many, the answer is no. Exhibit A, this Instagram clip from one Pumpkin Davis in Fort Worth showing regular unleaded at $3.35 a gallon.
Well, I be trying to tell y'all, man, that gas is super cheap at the QTs. Come to Texas.
Shout out to Quick Trip, indeed. But for plenty of other Texans, the bigger feeling right now is uncertainty. Oil prices, and the stock market for that matter, have been swinging sharply alongside statements out of the White House. We started this week with a fragile ceasefire. By midweek, hostilities had resumed, and now we're back to what officials are calling a pause in fighting with a deal around the corner, allegedly. And nobody really knows where things will stand a few days from now, say, by the time the markets open Monday morning. Meanwhile, the New York Times reports the world is rapidly drawing down existing oil reserves. Listener Amy Lewis says she's frustrated more people aren't talking about the long-term implications. She writes, "What happens if reserves are depleted and the Strait of Hormuz remains closed? We could be looking at a global energy crisis." Amy says the recent drop in gas prices may offer temporary relief, but worries Texans could be underestimating how quickly things can change. This is going to bring chaos and hardship to our doorstep if we don't convince Iran to open the strait. That's what Amy says, and we want to hear from you. Are fuel costs or uncertainty about where prices might go next changing your summer plans? Tell us. Leave us a message at texasstandard.org/talk. I'm Wells Dunbar, and this is the Talk of Texas.
Indeed it is. For generations, Texas has treated oil field wastewater as just that, waste, right? Pump it underground and forget about it. Well, now state regulators are proposing rules, the first of their kind, but to be honest, this story may be bigger than just some kind of routine regulatory change. It may be about whether Texas is about to turn one of its largest waste streams into a water supply. That story and a whole lot more on Monday's edition of the Texas Standard. Alas, we're out of time for today's big broadcast. You can keep up with the news 24/7 over at texasstandard.org. The managing editor of The Standard is Gabriel Munoz. Managing producer Laura Rice. Executive producer Ron DeFanning. I'm David Brown, wishing you a wonderful weekend.
Philanthropic support for Texas Standard comes from Casey and Scott O'Hare, the Winkler Family Foundation, Lynn Dobson and Greg Wooldridge, Adrian Killam, and the George Huntington family. Would your company or organization like to be a sponsor as well? Contact your local station for opportunities within your community. For statewide sponsorships, visit TexasPublicMediaNetwork.com.